Hello there and welcome to Saberjaw Gaming, where we always take the high ground. Now, you will know by the fact that I am a retro gamer that I have had a whole host of consoles. More than I can probably think of off the top of my head, going right the way back to the late 80s, early 90s, right through to, well, modern day. And over that time, I've played a lot of fantastic games, so I've decided to create a new series of videos where I will, in each video, pick one of those consoles that I've played and have a little look of 6 of the best games for each of those consoles that I once owned. And this is 6 of the best Nintendo Game Boy games. As a quick aside, I do actually still have my original Nintendo Game Boy in all its now slightly off-colour glory. It may not look as beautiful as it once did, but this is still a work of art. Number 6. Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins. Many people consider this to be the far superior Super Mario Land game, and graphically I would have to agree. It looks almost akin to some of the Mario games we were seeing on the Super Nintendo. However, the game is far too easy for me to consider better than the original. It was still a fantastic sequel and one of the best games the Nintendo Game Boy had. For the first time ever, Mario was exploring a map on the Nintendo Game Boy, similar to how we had in Super Mario World and Mario Bros. 3. This was also the game where we got the proper on-screen debut of Wario. Number 5. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Okay, quickly, a bit of a warning, some of the graphics on this video are going to be different shades of green, just depends where I had to source the footage from. Terminator 2 Judgment Day was an absolute challenge of a game. Not only did the game feature a wide variety of different types of gameplay, but the majority of them were rock solid. The gun-toting levels were challenging enough with platform elements thrown in, but there were a number of times that we had puzzle games thrown in there, whether we were hotwiring machinery or reprogramming the Terminator itself. The game does a very good job of utilising scenes from different aspects of the equally impressive movie, and you get to play as a range of different characters, including Sarah Connor, John Connor, and of course the T-800 himself. Let's be honest, you'd be gutted if you didn't get to play as Arnie in this. For me personally, this game was something of a forever challenge. It was one of the few games I had back then that I never actually managed to complete, at least when I originally had it. This particular scene was as far as I got, and I remember dying, and let's just say I never quite forgave the game for what it did to my ego. That being said, this was one of the best movie tie-ins ever. Number 4. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fall of the Foot Clan. When this game was released, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were still at their absolute peak of popularity. While we didn't get to see the awesome different coloured headbands on the Nintendo Game Boy, everything was kinda green, it was still a lot of fun to play. It was a really cool idea, giving you the 4 different turtles instead of different lives. Yeah, you just got one life with each turtle, and a bunch of energy of course. You got to compete against the Foot Clan Mousers, Shredder, Bebop, Rocksteady. All of the cast and characters were here. The gameplay was basic as hell, side-scrolling, very basic platform, and you've got about 2 or 3 different attacks. But let's be honest, this was the Nintendo Game Boy. It was still a great deal of fun to play, and it was about pretty much everything anyone would have expected from it. The background and scenery changed as you jumped up and down between the sewers onto the back of lorries, so even in one level, it never got too boring. Number 3. DuckTales. While this truly iconic game was probably at its best on the Nintendo Entertainment System, I only ever had it on the original Game Boy, and truth be told, whilst it didn't have the colour of the game on the Nintendo itself, it was graphically almost the same. In fact, I really struggled to see that much of a difference, and the gameplay itself was just as good as well. Overall, this has got to be one of the most impressive ports I've ever seen. The Nintendo Game Boy thrived with platform games, and this is one of the most iconic and successful the console ever had. The music is still an absolute work of art to this day, and the way that the levels were selected, you sort of chose which one you wanted to go to next, made it perfect for a pick up and play portable games console like the Game Boy itself. Overall, this is one of the best games the console ever had, and for me personally, certainly one of my favourites. Number 2. Super Mario Land. This is an absolute classic. Like, I love this game so much. Super Mario Land was the first game I ever actually bought for the Game Boy. I say bought, I was a kid at the time, but it was the first game I had bought for me. Obviously the console came with Tetris, but this was the game I wanted. Super Mario was just an absolute icon at the time, and given that I didn't have the original Nintendo console, this was my first chance to truly capture and play that iconic Mario gameplay. But Super Mario Land didn't only come with that iconic gameplay, it came with a whole host of original gameplay. The aeroplane scenes, the submarine scenes, it was just an absolute clinic in fantastic gameplay. And whilst the game is a lot shorter than a lot of other Mario games, it isn't necessarily easier. In a lot of ways, Super Mario Land is as iconic as Super Mario Bros. This is a video game that had its own song in the charts. It was an absolute classic game, and without this, I don't know that the Game Boy itself would have been anywhere near as popular. Side note, this is also the game where we first get to meet Daisy. Class. Number 1. Of course, it is Tetris. This is the Nintendo Game Boy we're talking about, and Tetris isn't here because it just happens to be the one the console is sold with. It's just potentially the most iconic game for the Nintendo Game Boy. Truth be told, Tetris is probably the most iconic puzzle game of all time, and whilst there may be far prettier versions of the game released on a whole host of other consoles, this is what people think of when they hear Tetris. This is a game that's had a motion picture made about its creation, for God's sake. It is iconic, it is legendary, and it truly is a lot of fun to play and damn addictive. Most kids like myself at the time, when buying the Nintendo Game Boy and it came with Tetris, we kinda looked at it as a bit of an afterthought. It wasn't really the game we wanted to play. That was usually Super Mario Land or some other game. But once we had a little crack at this, we all found ourselves compelled to play and play and play. This is a true classic and is genuinely as much fun to play now as it was when it first came out. And that's it. 6 of the best Nintendo Game Boy games I ever owned. But what do you think? Do you have any other classics you think I missed? Comment below, let me know. And until next time, take the high ground.